How's it going, guys? The NHL Draft lottery is a few days away, so I figured I would try and figure out which NHL team deserves Rasmus Dahlin the most. Before I go through this video, I'd actually like you guys to comment which team you think I'm going to choose. Very curious to see what you guys think the answer is going to be compared to what it actually is. So, starting off, I think any team that made the playoffs this year doesn't deserve Dahlin, obviously. Even if they were knocked out in the first round, didn't even have a playoff win like LA or Anaheim, they still had a chance to Stanley Cup this year, and making the playoffs means they're better than half the league. And I think there's a reason why the teams that make the playoffs don't have a chance at the draft lottery, as, you know, there's half the league that needs that pick a lot more than them. So, right off the bat, the 16 playoff teams are just not in contention. Now, of the remaining teams, I want to look at who's won a Stanley Cup in the last 10 years. I feel like if it's been longer than a decade since you last won the Cup, it really doesn't matter. So only two teams that have actually won a Cup in the last 10 years that aren't in the playoffs this year are Chicago Blackhawks and the Detroit Red Wings. Now, Chicago actually won 3 Cups in a 6-year span, so obviously they've had a lot of success. They do not need Dahlin. And then Detroit's last Cup was actually exactly 10 years ago in 2008, and that was actually their 4th Cup in 11 years, and obviously they had a 25-year playoff streak, so I mean, I'm a Detroit fan. It'd be hard to argue, though, that Detroit deserves Dahlin more than some other teams that have suffered a lot more. Now, the next group of teams I wanted to eliminate were teams that missed the playoffs this year but made it last year. Very good chance a lot of these teams just had an off year and will be right back in the playoffs next year. In that case, you know, they probably don't need Dahlin to rebuild their team around. They have a good team. They just had an off year, whether it was injuries, other things, they got unlucky, whatever. So, starting off with the Calgary Flames, I think Calgary's a good team. They're one of the better teams in the West that missed the playoffs, and I could definitely see them being back in the playoffs next year. Unfortunately for them, though, the Islanders actually own their first-round pick, so if that pick wins any of the 3 lotteries, I'm gonna feel so bad for Calgary fans. The next team would be the Edmonton Oilers. Not only did they make the playoffs last year, they also have Connor McDavid on their team. I think most people would agree McDavid's probably gonna end up being the best hockey player of the modern NHL. So, I mean, the fact that they have him, they got so lucky in 2015 to win him when they were, the 4th last team. Not to mention that was also their 4th first overall pick in 6 years. I feel like Edmonton getting Dahlin would just be too much. You definitely have to spread the wealth around a bit. After that, we actually have another Canadian team, the Montreal Canadiens. This is a team I really don't know where they're going. I feel like they had a really good team, then this year was really bad. Carey Price looked like a Vezina goalie, then this year he didn't. Shea Weber was like a Norris Trophy defenseman, and then he kind of got older. He's been injured. Duran as the first-line center is a big question mark. I mean, center for them has always been a question mark. So that's a team where, I mean, maybe if they keep sucking for a few years, you could argue they deserve Dahlin. But right now, they've had a good amount of previous success, and I think last year could have just been an off year. Obviously, we'll find out next season whether or not that is the case. And after Montreal, we have the New York Rangers. Obviously, for the first time in a while, they're starting to do a bit of a rebuild. They want to get younger. This is actually the first time they missed the playoffs in the past 7 years. And over the course of those 7 years, they had 2 conference finals and a Stanley Cup finals. So again, there's a lot of teams that could use Dahlin more than the Rangers. After them is actually the Ottawa Senators. They made it, 1 game away from the Stanley Cup final last season. Followed that up with a terrible season, traded away a lot of core pieces of that team. And they're not going to have a first-round pick in 2019. But, I mean, still, they were a game away from the Stanley Cup final. Again, there's teams that are worse off. And finally, we actually have the St. Louis Blues. They were 1 game away from the playoffs this year. All they had to do was beat the Avs. And one cool fact about the Blues, even though they've never won a Stanley Cup, for the 50 or so years they've been a franchise, they only missed the playoffs 9 times. So the Blues are a very good franchise with a lot of good prospects in the system, so they'll be just fine without Dahlin. So we're now left with 7 teams that could be deserving of Dahlin. They are Arizona, Buffalo, Carolina, Dallas, Florida, New York Islanders, and the Vancouver Canucks. But I'm now going to get rid of teams that have had a first overall pick in the last 10 years. That includes both Florida, who obviously got Ekblad first overall in 2014, and the New York Islanders, who got Tavares first overall in 2009. I mean, they could lose Tavares this summer, but still they got him, and there's a chance he stays. And I feel like if you did get a first overall pick in the last 10 years, you don't really need another one more than a team who didn't. Now, keeping on that theme of a high pick, we're also going to get rid of teams that have had a top 3 pick in the past 5 years. So you have Arizona, who got Dylan Strome 3rd overall 2015. They were trying to tank for McDavid. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. Same goes for Buffalo. They got Eichel in 2015 and Sam Reinhart 2014. They actually finished last both those years. Definitely were tanking the McDavid year where they got Eichel. Not so sure about the other year where they got Reinhart. Maybe they were trying to get Ekblad. Also, you have Dallas, who got Heiskanen last year 3rd overall. They just barely missed the playoffs that year as well as this year. I think they were the best team heading into the trade deadline, All-Star break, one of those things to ever miss the playoffs. So they're definitely a good team that should be in the playoffs. Will probably be back next year, and with a top 3 pick the year before, they're definitely in no need of Dahlin. So we're now left with 2 teams who I feel are the most deserving for Rasmus Dahlin. They are the Carolina Hurricanes and the Vancouver Canucks. Now, both these teams have actually had 2 top 5 picks in the past 5 years. All these selections, though, were at number 5. I don't think either team was picked in the top 4 for at least 10 plus years. Carolina got Hanifin in 2015 and Lindholm 2013. Vancouver got Peterson 2017 and Juolevi 2016. Now, if you look how the 2 teams did this year, Carolina was definitely the better team, finished a lot higher in the standings, but Vancouver did have a Calder Trophy nominee in Brock Besser, so that kind of evens it up. If you look at past success, the Carolina Hurricanes have won 1 Stanley Cup. That was in 2006. The Vancouver Canucks made it to the Stanley Cup final in 2011. Obviously, everyone knows they lost to the Bruins in Game 7. So, I mean, the Vancouver Canucks were a game away from a Stanley Cup 7 years ago, and the Hurricanes won a Stanley Cup 12 years ago. So I guess those 2 things also kind of even out. Like, again, 1 game away from a cup, I'd say is pretty equal to a Stanley Cup that would happen 5 years before that. So I think the big thing, I guess, for this tiebreaker comes down to playoff drought. And if you guys don't know, this is going to be pretty shocking to you. The Vancouver Canucks haven't been in the playoffs for 3 years, so I mean, obviously they've had a bit of a rough patch lately. The Carolina Hurricanes, on the other hand, have been just dreadful for almost a past decade, as the last time they were in the playoffs was 2009. It's been 9 years since they last made the playoffs. The last time they made the playoffs, George W. Bush was the president at the start of that season, so that kind of tells you just how tough of a time they've had. And obviously, without ever having a top pick, it is really hard to like turn that franchise around. Also, there's one thing I forgot to show you guys. Like I was saying, the last time the Hurricanes made the playoffs was in 2009, and in the first round of the 2009 draft, the Hurricanes took Felipe Paradis, and he was the only player in that draft to never play an NHL game. So I'm convinced this dude somehow cursed the Hurricanes, and that's why they haven't made the playoffs since. So in my opinion, I think the Carolina Hurricanes are the team most deserving of Rasmus Dahlin. Not only do they have the longest playoff drought in the NHL at 9 seasons, but I also feel like they're one of the few bad teams that have never tanked. Even like in the 2015 draft, when they got Hanifin at 5, like they weren't actively trying to tank like Buffalo and Arizona, who were trading away half the team, the backup goalie who was playing well. Like they just kind of had a bad team and lived with it. I think they might have traded away Eric Stahl that year. It might have been the year after, but Carolina has never really actively tanked to me. So I feel like that is something that's kind of commendable. And if you followed them at all this year, you'll see that they're actually in the playoff race for the first half of the year. It wasn't until the second half that they really fell out of it. There's been a couple other years where they were just out of a playoff spot. So I feel like Rasmus Dahlin could definitely help that team, not only on the ice, but also just kind of getting the fans back in the building. Definitely let me know what you guys think about this. Hopefully at the beginning of the video, you'll have to comment with your guess of which team would be the most deserving. Very curious to see if anyone guessed Carolina. And now, guys, I'm going to sim the draft lottery just to see what would happen. If the hockey gods are just, you should see like Carolina or Vancouver with a top pick. If not, you're probably going to have like Chicago picking first overall. To do this, I'm actually using the Tankathon website. You can see there, draft lotteries in 3 days. Cannot wait for that. Buffalo with the highest odds of picking first overall and getting Dahlin. So here we go, guys. 3, 2, 1. Who is it going to be? Ottawa with the first overall pick. Calgary picking second. Or sorry, Islanders picking second via Calgary. And then Dallas their third. So actually a lot of bad luck there. Vancouver and Carolina both moved down to 8 and 13 respectively. Ottawa, we did say, kind of deserved it, but they were in the playoffs last year, a game away from the Stanley Cup final, so not really. Obviously, though, that trade they made, this makes them feel a lot better. They can keep Dahlin and then just give Colorado the 2019 pick. The Islanders, though, picking second via Calgary. Like, I feel so bad for Flames fans. They're most likely going to take Svechnikov with that pick, maybe Zadina. And then Dallas, again, they were like, what, the second best team, maybe the third best team that didn't make the playoffs this year, but they were the best team ever to miss at the All-Star break, trade deadline, whatever. They just had a kind of really bad month. And they, again, somehow win the third pick. That'd be insane. Moving up 10 spots, and they'll basically just get who's ever left between Svechnikov and Zadina. Like, if Dallas can't make the playoffs after 2 lottery wins when they were just outside, I don't even know. But that would be crazy if that's what happens. My favorite team, Detroit, they're picking 7th. Hopefully we could still grab Quinn Hughes at that point. Probably not, though. He plays for Michigan, so he's a local kid, and obviously I'd love to see that. But that's a pretty crazy draft lottery if that happens. You got a pick that Ottawa chose to protect, so it's a good thing they made that decision. A traded pick, and then a team that should have been in the playoffs picking number 3. So again, that's why I cannot wait for the draft lottery this Saturday. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see other videos like this, definitely leave that thumbs up. Also, guys, if you aren't subscribed yet, make sure to do that. On the road to 100K. Could really use your help. Thank you guys for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.